to meeting number 24 of the Ethics Committee.
3H and the motion adopted on Wednesday, September 17th, 2025. The committee is resuming its study of the challenges posed by artificial intelligence and its regulation. So I'd like to welcome our witness for the first hour today. We've got Wyatt Tessari-Lallier, who is the founder and executive director of the AI Governance and Safety Canada. Now, we were to have a second witness, Etienne Brisson. My understanding is that he is facing some serious road conditions. Mr. Hardy, you took the same route this morning. C'était pas bon, hein? Okay. Okay, so if he does get here...
And it wasn't good.
Second hour, I'm going to be glad to include him as a witness in that second hour. So, I'm going to call you Wyatt, okay? You have up to 5 minutes to address the committee. Go ahead, sir.
Monsieur le Président, Mesdames et Messieurs,
Mr. Chair, ladies and gentlemen of the committee, thank you for the honor of inviting me. AI Governance and Security Canada is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization and a community of people across the country. Our starting point is the question, what can we do in Canada and from Canada to ensure that AI is safe and beneficial for all? Since 2022, we have been providing the federal government with public policy recommendations, such as our submissions on the AI and Data Bill and our unique testimonies to parliamentary committees.
Heard about the impacts that Canadians are already dealing with. Even with current systems, chatbots have talked teenagers into suicide, and developers can't reliably predict what the models will do. And you've heard that with capabilities continuing to accelerate, there are much bigger risks fast approaching. That global companies like OpenAI and Google are competing to build smarter-than-human AI systems in the near term, systems which they themselves admit won't know how to control. If a nuclear power plant melts down, it's a tragedy, but the rest of the world moves on and eventually recovers. With smarter-than-human AI, we may not get a second chance. If, through accident or poor design, a system interpreted human beings as an obstacle to achieving the goal it was given and started taking actions against us, there is no guarantee that technologists or governments would ever be able to regain control. It would be a global crisis the world might never recover from. If you find the situation downright scary, you're not alone. The question is, what do we do? As Canadians sitting around this table in 2026, looking at the exponential advance of AI, mostly driven by entities outside of our borders, what can we do? If we want, we can try to play whack-a-mole with current AI impacts and ignore the bigger picture within which they fit. We can try to deny or dismiss what the leading labs are building, wasting the limited time we have to operate. Or we can take a hard look at where things are headed and start preparing now, in a manner that also addresses current risks. Because if we're not ready to give up, Canada has a number of options at its disposal. In October, we published our white paper, Preparing for the AI Crisis, A Plan for Canada. In it, there are 4 key recommendations. First, pivot to meet the AI crisis. The development of smarter-than-human AI is the biggest threat to Canadian safety, and for that reason alone deserves to be a top priority. But AI will disrupt almost every other file you're working on, from national defense to jobs to healthcare to education to energy and the environment. Much like with COVID in 2020, there are times when the responsible thing for government to do is to pivot to address the developing crisis and reassess the priority of other files accordingly. Given its wide scope and long-term implications, AI needs to be a cabinet-level priority, and action needs to be coordinated with opposition parties and the provinces. Number 2, spearhead global talks. The race to smarter-than-human AI is a global phenomenon that no country can manage on its own. At this time more than ever, the world needs leadership, and Canada is well placed to deliver it. The strongest card we can play is to advance global talks and solutions and lay the groundwork for an AI treaty that the US and China might sign when the crisis hits and they realize they have no alternative. Number 3, build Canada's resilience. While domestic action alone cannot protect Canadians, plenty can be done to mitigate the secondary impacts, such as putting in place supports for displaced workers, banning deepfakes, and strengthening critical infrastructure against cyber attacks. By taking the initiative at home, Canada will be in a stronger position to navigate the AI crisis and negotiate from a position of strength. And 4, launch a national conversation on AI. Canadians deserve to be informed and consulted on a technology that will fundamentally reshape their lives. We need nationwide public hearings to educate and consult on core societal decisions pertaining to our future with AI. Last week, Prime Minister Carney put Canada in a leadership role on the world stage. This is an unprecedented opportunity to push for global AI safety measures while building resilience at home, to be the adult in the room when it matters most. The stakes couldn't be higher. The clock is ticking. Let's get to work.
Okay, thank you for your opening statement. We're going to have 6-minute rounds, and starting with Mr. Barrett. So these are questions that are going to come back and forth. And I just, for the sake of the interpreters as well, just ask you to speak a little bit slower in your responses, if you don't mind. I know they had your opening statement, which was fine, but we want to make sure that we have proper interpretation. Go ahead, Mr. Barrett, for 6 minutes.
What specific evidence-based risks justify urgent federal intervention of the kind that you've suggested? And how do we avoid a situation where the policies that are made are driven by fear instead of what the actual situation on the ground is, based on perhaps the examples or the evidence that you'd be able to share with us?
Sure. So far, we're seeing a bunch of early warning signs, everything from chatbots talking teenagers into suicide, or whether it be job impacts among the youth, or scams and record levels of scams and AI-powered cyber attacks. These are in themselves they are important, they need to be dealt with, but they're not in themselves a justification for whole of government action. However, why they matter is where they're headed. Right now, we have teenager AI, very simple systems, relatively simple systems, I should say. What all the leading AI labs are actively building, but if you go to their website, they're saying we are building smarter than human AI systems. According to their CEOs, according to a lot of experts, who, including the engineers who left these organizations as whistleblowers because they don't trust them, also say yes, 2 to 5 years on smarter than human AI is possible. And so the reason why governments need to act currently and be proactive is really the fact that we may not have much time to prepare for the much bigger risks to come. And given that it will require global solutions, and global solutions take forever to put in place, even if we have 20 years, we're in a race against time. On the point of hope and fear, I fully agree. We can't, I'm doing what I'm doing because I believe there are still solutions and because I think there are positive ways forward. But we can't let fear paralyze us, and we can't let tell ourselves that AI is no good at all, because there are a lot of really good applications of AI, healthcare, energy, all that kind of stuff. So there's I think it's very important to be clear-minded, neither enthusiastic nor pessimistic about AI. Just be very clear-eyed about what's coming and how we can prepare.
Is there more than one? Is there more than one strategy that needs to be employed when we look at some of the real effects that we're seeing from the use of this new gen or teenage generation of AI, and one of the most real effects, some of the most real effects that we've seen, of course, are news reports about language models counseling people to die by suicide, to take their own lives, vulnerable people. We've seen also a rise in the creation of child sexually exploitive material and deep fakes using children, and that is the worst kind of deep fake, but it's not the only kind. It's happening to public figures and also to anyone who has a picture online, and really to anyone whose likeness can be described to a language model. So these are some of the real world consequences that we're seeing today. Those go along with, you referenced, the effects on the job market for youth, for entry-level jobs. What's the answer, or is it a series of measures that need to be taken? Is this a question where, when we talk about deepfakes, where individuals need to update criminal law so that individuals are held personally responsible for their actions in the creation of this unacceptable material that is not intended to be covered by free speech laws or freedom of expression, and goes well beyond that. It's victimizing individuals. Is it instead that we need to pass laws where it's incumbent on the tech companies to ensure the safeguards are in place, or is it both?
Yes, both. I do think improvements to the criminal code to be able to deal specifically with deepfakes would help. I would also say, and what witnesses before me have said before, current laws could go a lot further than they currently are in terms of protecting Canadians. If we gave more resources to the current regulators to be able to apply them in the context of AI, that could go a lot. It'd be a much faster way and possibly more effective way of getting protections in place. In terms of the responsibilities for technologists, I do think it's very hard to stop a teenager in their basement in Russia from creating a deepfake of somebody. However, you can tell Google that if you want to do operations in Canada, you have to take down deepfakes within a certain amount of time, so that the image itself is created, it doesn't get spread, and it doesn't harm people's reputations. So I do think yes. So yes, strongly to both.
Right. I would just say in the last 10 seconds that with all of the potential risks and how catastrophic they can be, we might first have to address these very real and serious challenges like the ones that we just talked about. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Barrett. Monsieur Sarré pour 6 minutes.
Mr. Sarré, 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Happy New Year to everyone here. And thank you for your testimony and your presentation. Before asking a question about what the government or the House of Commons can do, I want to talk about the following. When you look at the digital world, and when you specifically look at AI, I look at this in two ways. Whether you want it or not, AI will become something as basic as electricity or the internet. It is also in the domain of decision-making and the operational side. It is also in the geopolitical world. That just increases dependency. And humans and people, when they depend on anything or any piece of technology, creates certain vulnerabilities. And this is my personal opinion as someone who has worked in that field. I do not think that we can do anything about dependency. We cannot even stop it, but we can do something about vulnerability. We can reduce our vulnerability, but we cannot reduce our dependency. So this is my question to you, who is an expert. How do you think the government can develop a strategic framework? Or what can the government do to do concrete work? What can the government concretely do to reduce vulnerability? Especially when you take into account the fact that there's this breakneck pace of growth in AI. Because of the current world that we are in, where things are accelerating at this breakneck speed, always reacting to the AI of yesterday won't work. So we need to be forward-thinking. Sometimes a government measure takes 2 to 5 years to be implemented. Or maybe it will take 20 years. So we need to look at things beyond regulations. But when it comes to dependency, if you look at the world of work, some employees have begun to forget how to do things. So when you talk about resiliency, it's not just about humans, it's also a society that also loses a certain amount of resiliency. And then all of a sudden, people are lost if it disappears. So I believe that there needs to be social redundancy. So yes, use AI to improve productivity and to move faster, that's very useful. But at the same time, maintaining a system that makes sure that humans know how to stay human so that we are not that dependent and not vulnerable. So I'm saying that there are two sides. There's the technology itself that we cannot control, because as you have said, someone can do it in their basement. But we can educate users. You talked about education. Now, I do not want to influence your answer, but I want to know, is there a way to recommend a certain level of digital sovereignty? Because without it, it's hard to talk about other technologies that we do not control. Absolutely. Especially in the world where the US is threatening us. Computing power is done in the USA. These are American companies. So if they want to restrict our access, then the Canadian economy will face challenges because we will no longer have access to that tool. So yes, having our own data centers and being able to do what we have to do at home without depending on other countries. Yes. So my other question is how to control the Googles of this world. We're not talking about digital sovereignty. We don't have it yet. But I have read that many countries and the EU that have tried to have that digital sovereignty. But in the meantime, do you believe that we can have a certain control? And I am using this word carefully. Can we have a control on how these solutions are introduced to our markets and how people use them? I'm going to repeat myself here, but if we want that control, we need to be able to build our own AI tools and have our own data centers, and to have an educated labor force that does not depend on that. I will close by saying what I have said earlier, and this is my opinion. As a government, we cannot control our dependence nor the evolution of AI, but we can at least do something about the education of our citizens so that they are less vulnerable, and we can ensure that our public infrastructure like healthcare is less vulnerable, because our history depends on it and our future depends on it too. Thank you very much, Mr. Sari. Mr. Thériault, 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first question may be one that encompasses a lot. In your document, you recommended the improvement of the cyber defense of critical infrastructure and to improve the ability to defend against AI and drones, and to prepare security agents to defend against the use of chemical and biological weapons facilitated by AI. We are facing more powerful systems. We agree that we have to defend ourselves, but is this strategy a losing one in long term? In other words, should we not prevent the development of powerful systems that may be more powerful than our defenses before superhuman intelligence, superhuman AI? Because in the long term, we can think about drones powered by AI and everything else. And when it comes to improving our infrastructure against cyber attacks, but Canada cannot go at it alone. The best strategy and Canada's strength is that we can lead global talks, because all countries are facing the same situation as us. The USA, nor China, nor Russia can defend against superintelligent AI. So everybody needs to work together to collaborate, because everyone is vulnerable. I agree that in the short term, we can do a lot to improve our resiliency and security. But in the medium term, the only solution is a global one so that we can at least control them. So what you're essentially saying right now is that with your knowledge, you are confirming that we are losing control and that in the medium term we might lose control. Is that right? Yes. I'm referring to experts. I'm much more of a generalist at the intersection between technology and government. But the experts who work in these labs, who have developed these systems, have said they do not know how to control these systems and they are scared. And they are accelerating because they fear that if they don't do it, someone else will do it, and they may be the only ones who can control it. This race really is senseless. The current impacts of the system are important, but they're not earth-shattering. It may lead a teenage person to kill themselves, but an AI that knows more than us can act quicker than us. And then we are vulnerable if the AI system decides that it wants to do something and we will be defenseless against it. Earlier, we talked about misuse cases of this technology and its negative effects, even its nefarious effects on teenagers. So on top of that, there may be the malevolent use of this technology. So in the short run, there are biological risks. It's already possible to use AI to create new viruses that human bodies may be vulnerable to. There are also biological weapons. And if humans build a smarter AI, then that AI will know how to use it. The simple risk of AI developing a weapon of mass destruction means that we need to take everything seriously. Are you optimistic about the different governments and powers around the world, as well as the geopolitical positions and the inherent interest for superpowers to stay superpowers? Right now, when it comes to AI regulation, it is a black hole. Compare that to nuclear weapons. In the world of nuclear weapons, it was possible to see everything. What can we do to control it? So there is already the race between countries. People talk about dominating in AI. China says that they want to be the world leader in AI. But what's their real goal? When they say the USA or China, they want to, what is their goal? Currently, it's economic and military. They want to be able to defend themselves against others, and they too want to be the world's #1 economy. So there are these strong national incentives to be #1 in AI. There are incentives for the companies too. And that leads us all to this breaking point. What makes me optimistic and also realist is that all these countries are facing the same problems as us. If someone creates this AI that we cannot control, everyone loses. And at one point or another, they will have to work together or else they will all lose. Thank you very much, Mr. Thériault. That was over 6 minutes. We will now move to the second round of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witness. You cited in your testimony AI chatbots, and I want to drill down a little bit on that topic, specifically as it pertains to youth. First of all, I take it you would agree that this is an area where there is a need for regulation. Okay. Now, before a U.S. Judiciary Subcommittee hearing last fall, as well as in other reports, there is data from the U.S. From Common Sense Media that 72% of teens in the U.S. have used an AI companion at least once. Do you have any data for Canada? I would take it would be similar.
I think it's similar. I haven't seen exact numbers, but yes, yeah.
Okay. Now, you were asked in general about some of the AI harms, just looking specifically at chatbots. Would you elaborate on some of those harms to youth?
Absolutely. Well, so the whole relationships and mental health piece is huge because we're basically doing this giant experiment with our kids, introducing these AI companions into their lives, and we don't know what that'll do for their ability to socialize, what they'll do for their ability to work together. We're already seeing a lot of mental health concerns, and I'm sad the other witness wasn't here because he is definitely a lot more experienced in this area. Yeah, I mean, we see like AI addiction in terms of like kids can't give up on it because these systems are so pleasing and so sycophantic. They always tell you what you want to hear, that they get caught in these loops and going down these dark holes. So there is, and we're seeing in live, live experiment with this, and we're still to see what the long-term effects will be. But it is a very concerning development because these are key moments in their development, and if their mental health and if their learning is being messed up with, then that's a problem.
Yeah, and these systems are trained based on the entire internet. Is that fair? Is that accurate? So that would include everything from suicide forums to porn sites to other harmful content, and this will inevitably and is making its way into these chats that youth are having.
Yes, I think, some of the companies are making efforts to limit what data goes into it, but the problem is the more general the model, the more capable it is. So the more you train it on a variety of information, the more it understands how the world fits together. So I can't speak to exactly what data is going into the models, for example, Gemini or ChatGPT, but the fact that they have been talking, teenagers into suicide, and the fact that they do occasionally, produce instructions on how to build a chemical bomb, suggests that they have been trained on very dangerous material.
Well, and would you agree that what compounds the challenge in terms of some of the risks and the ability for parents to detect that their loved one is being exposed to sexually explicit or harmful content is that these are often invisible, and in fact there is no transparency, but you're even engaging with AI in some instances.
Well, and a lot of kids prefer to talk to the ChatGPT because it feels safer than to talk to a parent. They're not aware of the privacy concerns, and they're not aware that these systems are not as reliable or as hopefully as wise as the parent is. So it is. It's a very rapidly evolving problem with a lot of ways it can go sideways, and we're seeing some impacts already, and we actually expect to see more.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, in the fall was a bipartisan bill introduced in the U.S. Senate, introduced by Senators Hawley and Blumenthal, the GUARD Act. Are you aware of that?
Somewhat, yes, yeah.
Okay. So, in short, at a high level, it does three things. It would ban AI companions for minors. It would mandate AI chatbots disclose its non-human status, and it would provide new penalties for companies that make AI for minors that solicits or produces sexual content. I'd be interested in your thoughts on those three components.
Those are broadly the directions you want to take in terms of protections, liability, and yeah.
And I would also note, consistent with the need for transparency, there was a report that was submitted recently to the government's AI task force by one of its members that calls for, among other things, with respect to AI products, that there be visible labeling, source transparency requirements, metadata and digital watermarking, are those measures you would also support?
Absolutely. People should be able to know that they're interacting with an AI system, and it's not always obvious right now, and it'll be harder and harder as time goes on. So yes, labeling is a bare minimum, yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Ms. Church, for 5 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome, Mr. Tesseri-Lallier. Question for you, maybe just picking up on some of my colleagues' questions. I'm also concerned very much about the impact of AI socially on kids in particular. And one of the things that I noticed in your white paper was that part of your approach to building Canada's resilience and protecting, I guess, online safety was around the concept of requiring AI labeling and banning unacceptable capabilities. And I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about the labeling in particular and how you see that developing and maybe how that could be useful for us.
Yes. So labeling, I mean, there are a bunch of ways to go about it, and we're, I guess, agnostic as to the exact technical path. But certainly, it's something that could be developed as a global standard. And like, for example, the Internet Protocol, which helped the Internet happen, is a global standard. Same thing with labeling. It could be, I've heard proposals, for example, having Unicode, basically the language behind the text, basically be labeled as AI, so that a computer would automatically know if a letter is written by AI or not. So there are a lot of solutions like that, for example, that could happen. Ultimately, it's going to take probably some government impetus to force these companies to actually do it, because it will be a pain to actually label, and there will always be the challenge of, even if you label a piece of text, somebody can take a photo of it and copy it over to their computer, and now suddenly it's no longer labeled. So it is. It's the kind of thing where you can't, labeling won't stop misuse in that sense, but it can, if you catch somebody using AI that isn't labeled, that gives you an opportunity to take action. So it's not a full solution on its own, but it's a step in the direction towards giving the incentives for people to actually use AI correctly.
Mm-hmm. Talk to me what that would even look like as a user, as somebody who is on the internet and social media regularly. What would I see as a consumer? How would that label be applied?
There are a bunch of ways to go about it. I mean, some, for example, would even say something like, font color. So you're reading text and you see if it's in a certain color, oh, that's AI. Same thing with like voice over the radio. If there's a certain tone in the background, you hear, oh, that's AI. Mm-hmm. There are, again, there's 1,000 different technical ways to go about it, but it would have to be something where instinctively, as soon as the user sees it, oh yes, this is AI, and have that be a global standard across the world. And there is, there are. The logo of the little the four-letter star, you'll see that around in various things. It's kind of a step in the right direction, but there is, we're at the very beginning of basically a very big complex problem, and it will take a clear direction from governments around the world, basically, that this is required, and that we expect this of companies who are building AI.
And when you talk about prohibiting other unacceptable capabilities, just to use the language from your white paper, what type of capabilities are you talking about? Can you expand a little bit on that? I mean, obviously, we're very concerned at the moment. We brought forward criminal legislation to deal with things like deep fakes. But are there other capabilities that you would particularly encourage us to focus in on?
Yes. Well, so, I mean, to mirror the EU AI Act for categories of unacceptable, high, medium, in the unacceptable category, these are systems that, for example, refuse to be shut off, systems that deceive the user, systems that will modify themselves without notice. So, for example, if you give an AI system a task of doing something and it calculates that it needs to modify itself in order to achieve that task, that should be an unacceptable capability, because suddenly your system is a very different system than we created, and the risk profile changes dramatically. Another one is autonomous self-replication. So you ask your system to do something, and it calculates it needs to make a bunch of copies of itself on different servers, so that if the first server it's on goes under, it can still keep running. That's a problem, because suddenly your model is no longer on your computer; it's also on 10 other different computers, and you don't necessarily have access to them. There's a whole bunch of in our recommendations for the AI Data Act that we go into details to which are the biggest ones. Unprompted self-modification, commandeering of resources if your model starts stealing in order to achieve this task. All these things are behaviors we're starting to see happen in test settings, and they are, if we allow that, then we're very much in a vulnerable position.
Right. I mean, one of the things I'm very interested in as well is just establishing a duty of care for these
Yeah.
platforms. I mean, it's a legal concept that I think belongs here, and certainly there needs to be ways that we're putting guardrails on, particularly what youth, children are exposed to, and ensuring that in some of the situations that you've raised, that there's a clear liability for when AI models are presenting incorrect or very harmful information, especially to kids.
Well, and liability has to be with those who understand best how these systems work, and I think that's where the top talent there is at Google and Meta and the rest should be responsible for the behavior of their models even after deployment, because you can't ask a teenager or somebody who doesn't know anything about AI to know what the harms are and how to use it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Monsieur Thériault, 5 minutes.
Mr. Thériault, 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. You wrote in your document, you wrote, fundamentally, general AI is a challenge related to digital skills and human collaboration. The CEO of Anthropic said that they probably only understand only 3% of how this system works internally. So if we don't know how it works, why not focus on negotiating for a global ban? We see the crisis coming, but from a technical perspective, we don't know how to solve it. The other alternative is to make sure that the technology is not created to begin with. Here's an example. Let's say many companies in downtown Montreal or Toronto are trying to create nuclear technology and is endangering everyone around them. We're not going to ask how to balance safety with everything else. We will send the RCMP to stop them. But these are companies that are creating technologies that are jeopardizing everyone, and they themselves are saying that they do not know how to control these systems. And at one point, the governments need to say, no, it is our duty to protect people and to pause it until we know how to ensure that these systems are safe. So the main role of the government is to protect people. If these businesses are doing something that is too dangerous, the goal of the government is to stop them. And that requires every country in the world to step up to the plate, or else we will all be in danger. So in your document, you said that a responsible solution for the future of AI needs to go through a global agreement. That needs to be done, and that may quickly become a global ban. I understand the current geopolitical situations at play. The USA and China are in the same boat as us. They do not want to create systems that will endanger their people and make them lose power and create wide-scale unemployment. Even though they do not want to work together, at one point they will have to do it. So us, as a middle power, our best bet is to move forward with these talks and to set in place treaties so that when people are ready, they can do it. How much time do I have left? 2 minutes. Your document says that labs within 1 to 3 years succeed, and that we may have less than 18 months to implement a global solution. Can you elaborate? It's very hard to predict the future. If we are lucky, we have 10 to 20 years to prepare. If we're not lucky, tomorrow a high-tech lab can publish a model or unveil a model that's a superintelligence model. However, we have no choice but to prepare for the scenarios that may happen immediately, and if we're lucky, these scenarios will take longer time to happen. We need to put in place the basis the foundations to ensure that we do not lose control. And then, when it comes to how many years, the CEOs of Google DeepMind, Anthropic, and OpenAI have said 2 to 5 years. Some others have said 1 to 3 years. These are very smart people who are following what's happening very closely, and they're telling us that we need to be ready. I hope that they are wrong. I hope that we will have time. But the careful thing to do is to be ready for the scenarios that may happen immediately. Just to be cautious, right? Exactly. Thank you. You have 20 seconds left. Oh, I thought I had a whole minute. It's fine. I'll take back those 20 seconds later. Mr. Hardy, 5 minutes. Thank you and welcome. We often hear when we talk about AI, we talk about Terminator, we talk about the end of the world. But I feel that for some of our listeners and some of our decision makers, they don't think that's probable. They're saying, calm down, 1 year, 2 years, 20 years. They don't know. But I want to talk about something that's more on the ground. Right now, inflation in Canada is very high. 50% of Canadians are $200 away from bankruptcy, and hundreds of thousands of people need to line up at food banks. On the other side, there are these businesses that they see AI as a way to cut down on payroll and then have systems that work 24/7. Do you believe that the government needs to say, look, be careful here? If you use AI instead of hiring a Canadian, you need to pay. Because everyone who will lose their jobs will have to go to food banks that are already overwhelmed. For example, Spotify a few years ago said that before hiring, we need to make sure that we cannot use AI. Because companies know that to stay competitive, they need to spend less, and payroll is always the highest cost. So if we are in a world with very high rates of unemployment, there will be less tax revenue, for example. There will be huge impacts for governments. What we see now, when it comes to the impact on work, it is focused in certain sectors. For example, the world of IT or artists. But this will spread across the economy. We do not know if that will happen quickly or slowly. We shall see. But if there's no plan to support those who lose their jobs, how can you ensure that there will be enough tax revenue to ensure that the government stays afloat? Today, this is just a warning sign of what may happen. So I want to talk about something else. You know that Canada has the world's 5th largest reserve of fresh water. Apparently, every answer generated by AI will use 500 milliliters of letter. And it's more for pictures, and ChatGPT uses countless more times of water than Google searches. So do we need to also legislate things around fresh water? Because if AI uses more fresh water than first, it will harm humans and then will also harm agriculture. So right now, people need more and more AI data centers. And if they use water, they are harming human life, right? One of the big challenges with statistics related to freshwater consumption is that we do not know what they actually are because companies developing them are not telling us those answers. In certain cities with water restrictions, you see a huge amount of impact. I've heard other numbers. So yes, there are already these impacts. The first step is to tell companies to tell us how much water they're using. The more that people use AI, the more data centers are needed, and the more data centers there are, the more water people need. So, right, this is not people playing golf. Everyone has AI on their phones. So if every AI search costs 500 milliliters of water and everyone uses them, that's a lot of water. In the USA, they believe that for AI alone, it will increase electricity consumption by 20% over the next 10 years. So that's billions and billions of dollars. They're reopening nuclear power plants to provide with enough power. So the scale is important. So first, we need to tell companies to tell us clearly how much they're using. We don't know the exact statistics. I do not have time for a follow-up question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Watt, for coming. Some argue that A1 regulation will limit innovation and competitiveness, while others say regulatory certainty is essential for responsible scaling. Based on your experience, does effective AI governance ultimately enable or constrain innovations?
That is a tough question because the technology is moving so fast that a good regulation for today's AI may be out of date by next month. I would say, right now in our white paper, for example, we didn't openly call for much new regulation simply because of there's so many areas where it is just really hard to monitor what's going on in AI and to regulate software because it's a very fast evolving technology. However, there's some basics you can put in place, like, for example, banning deepfakes and protecting children. Also, to an earlier point, there's a lot of existing laws, for example, like human rights law, for example, with biased algorithms. That is something that you should be able to protect Canadians against through existing laws by investing in the regulators, ensuring the Privacy Commissioner has enough power and resources to be able to track everything that's going on. So I think, given how fast things are moving and given how hard it is to accurately create laws that will be robust to the future, focus on like the simplest pieces, like the banning deepfakes, requiring labeling, and I would say focus on applying current laws as well as you can, because that, like the one analogy that comes up is, like right now we're dealing with a cute little bear cub that you need legislation to avoid scratches and bites. If it takes you 5 years to put a law in place, by the time you put that law in place, you're now dealing with a full-grown grizzly, and the laws you'll need are very, very different, and the protections you'll need are very, very different. So that's where, like, given that we're in this transition period, doubling down on current laws, making sure the regulators have the power they need to be able to act on them, while focusing on the things that you can do relatively quickly and simply, is probably your best strategy.
Thank you. What role AI should have in running the part of the government? And do you have any experience or any knowledge if any other government around the world are using?
Well, it is clear that AI can be used to make government more efficient, to also offer more services to Canadians at a lower cost. It is also clear that part of the reason you can do that is because it will cost less than salaries, because you'll be replacing a lot of human work with AI. That is a balance that I don't claim to have the right answer for. I will say I use AI every day as productivity. It's very useful. I would encourage government to use it wisely, obviously within guidelines and with privacy and the kind of impacts in mind. This is the challenge. I mean, the more useful these systems get, the cheaper, the more effective they are, the more we'll be dependent on them, and the less we'll be relying on human labor. And so we'll need to figure out when we talk about having a national conversation on AI, we need to talk to Canadians about, okay, so if we reach a point where AI and robotics can do essentially all work, should we automate everything, or do we want to keep jobs for ourselves? If so, what and under what conditions? Like, that is a very big conversation. not to mention the psychological impact. I mean, a lot of people, their life's work, their sense of self comes from their work. And if you tell them, well, actually, what you're doing is no longer needed because now AI can do all the coding, and so you can retire now as a coder. Or if you're telling an actor or voiceover actor, sorry, you can now retire because AI can do all the voiceover acting. Are we going to ask that actor to become an engineer or become something else? I mean, there's a lot of just like the psychological, societal impacts of this change happening so fast is something that we need to be proactively thinking about and managing. And this is where having a national conversation, giving people the opportunity to understand what's going on, where things are headed, and a meaningful ability to provide input as to what they want, I think it's an essential piece of the solution.
One of the things that you mentioned in your earlier remarks, weapons of mass destruction, nuclear weapons. I mean, U.S., China, and Russia, I don't think they care about anything as long as they are the superpower in that field. What can the rest of the world do to prevent where the humanity may be at risk of being wiped out?
Well,
I need as quick a response as you can.
Okay, sure. Well, as I said before, they, as much as they like power, they also need to collaborate. Kids are also vulnerable to AI, so that's where our opening is. Yeah.
That was quicker than I thought. Wonderful. Monsieur Hardy, pour 5 minutes, et on va terminer.
Mr. Hardy, 5 minutes, and then we will close with Ms. Lapointe for 5 minutes. Mr. Brisson is here. He has just arrived. And for the next hour, we will have 3 witnesses. Mr. Hardy, over to you. So if we continue the discussion, we have seen in the past that polarization was created by the algorithms behind them. AI is more advanced. And we talked about narrow AI versus more broader AI. Are we facing another serious problem that needs to be quickly solved, notably by government, so that facts come out quicker than just polarization, which is bad for democracy and for the advancement of society? There's way more information pollution. And it's the government's responsibility to deal with that. There are a lot of risks. Because there is the political side to it. Because, yes, we are bombarded with more and more information in the past. That was not a problem because there wasn't a whole lot of information. It was mostly through the big media companies. But now, if you want a functional democracy, where you need to make sure that everyone has the same facts. So with some precaution, I will say that, yes, the government has a role to play to ensure the quality of discussions and to ensure that big tech bans rage baiting. So algorithms that will always push forward the most sensational, enraging content, and rather instead support content that is more based on facts. Let's say you look at state media like the CBC. Do you believe that there needs to be clear guidelines so that when you watch news funded by the government, that there needs to be fact checks to ensure that this is not done through deepfakes and that they are looking at facts that are far from opinion, and that does not solely seek to polarize? Because I believe that it's part of the process to use AI and to see the algorithm behind it, but it needs to be the government's responsibility, especially when it's done with taxpayer dollars, to ensure that everything's based on facts and that we stay far away from deepfakes. Yes, I agree that the government has a role to play. I understand that it can be tough to do so. And to see the government impose its point of view on people. So, okay, maybe I got this wrong. I'm sorry to interrupt, but essentially what I'm saying is, people say, look, this is not a real video. despite the high quality of the deepfake. And can we say that we will never use deepfakes? Purely based on the picture, no. The only real way to do so is to consult other sources, so other people or people on the ground, to ask if it has actually happened or not. That means journalists need to be there. Once again, you cannot just rely on the text or the audio or the pictures. So we have already lost control over this. Yes. Final question. How much time do I have left? 1.5 minutes. Earlier, you talked about legislating before something happened instead of looking back and saying, whoops, maybe we should have legislated. So should we not, as government, talk here in Ottawa about starting creating legal guides on the potential of what things may look like? And if things happen, regardless of how they look like, then at the least we have these foundations and we have this control framework in place instead of being 3-4 years behind. Yes, we need to be forward-looking and be ready. If you want to have proactive laws, then you need to give regulators the flexibility to act quickly. In tech, for example, every day Google needs to update its browser rules based on searches. So if we want regulators to work quickly, then they need to be able to do things on a daily basis. So that requires a lot of power and a lot of oversight on that regulator to ensure that there's no abuse of power. And it will allow the government to act at the same pace as technology. Now, that's not my expertise to tell you how to do it. But if you want to do it ahead of time, that's what you need to do. For example, the EU AI Act already has parts that are outdated. So if you need to be forward-looking, you need to be very forward-looking, and you need to have oversight to ensure no abuse of power. Ms. Lapointe. Thank you. I've learned a lot. You just referred to the EU AI Act. It's only been there for about a year or two, and it's already outdated. So if you say that there needs to be flexibility, what are you referring to? So a general law that will allow the regulator to act and to create regulations very quickly. They need to react to something that almost has happened overnight. And I know that does not exist in government. So it will be something new. It's something that should be tried. I'm not sure if it will work or not, but if we want legislation to be updated, then it needs to be very flexible. I'm sure that you know that Canada is one of the founding members of the AI Safety Institute network. So what are the risks when a country works alone? It looks like a nuclear arms race. Everyone wants to move as quick as possible to obtain it, and that it's the only one that has it. So how can we coordinate at the global level? As you've said, we're a middle power. I want to hear your thoughts. The most important, it's to understand that we're all in the same boat when it comes to risks. Even though it is unlikely that Trump will start international talks, they will also need a treaty. So Canada, as of today, can advance suggested treaties and to start talks, to start creating alliances, and to create the groundwork so that when the moment comes and when the political will is there because they have no longer the choice. They have something to sign. If you wait for the crisis to happen to undertake talks, look at climate change. Look at how long it took for a global agreement. So we need to start today. And Canada is in a good position to do so today. So you talk about timelines. So let's look ahead in 5 to 10 years. Do you believe that the current approach that Canada has adopted, combined with investments in research, safety institutions, and governance frameworks, are these sound foundations for a competitive and responsible AI system? I think it's fairly okay for today's AI. But we are talking about getting ready for the future. So there are these good initiatives such as the Canadian Institute on AI Safety or the Voluntary Code of Conduct. But this is reacting to today or yesterday's AI, and what's missing, it's a vision of what's ahead of us. And you really see the exponential trends. Maybe the last missing piece of AI may be developed in 6 months, even though it took them 50 years to get from where it first started to ChatGPT. So there are these good foundations when it comes to responsible AI, and then we can keep on that path. But there's still a whole lot of work left to be done. Very interesting. We have asked you a lot of questions. Do you have something else to add? Maybe something we have not asked you yet. I think everything has been covered. But maybe on an optimistic note. Even though people may say that it's impossible to find solutions surrounding AI, Prime Minister Carney said that we need to do things that we have previously never thought possible. That's what we need to do with AI now. We may think it's impossible, but the future is unwritten. History has not been written yet. So there is more that we can do. Thank you.
If there's anything that you might want to follow up on, certainly advise the clerk if there's anything that was missed further to Madame Lapointe's question. But I want to thank you for being here today.